Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here and supporting my videos and my journey through Expedition Wilderness. So I honestly didn't know what I was driving into when I turned off of Highway 93 and headed towards this place. I had read a little bit and I thought I knew the general story. And in short, it's basically a bison range in Montana with supposed beautiful scenery. So that's kind of a given if you've ever driven pretty much anywhere in Montana. But driving through, I wasn't really prepared for what I would actually feel. So this is the CSKT Bison Range, and it's located in northwestern Montana. It's about an hour north of Missoula. The CSKT stands for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, the three peoples, the Salish, the Kootenai, and the Pend d'Oreille, who have called this valley home since way before any map was ever drawn. And those right there are some of the bison that live there, feeding on the grass, just living their lives, just feet from the car. I want you to really look at them for a second because what these animals represent goes so much deeper than what you see on the surface. So to understand this place, you have to go back, and I mean way back. So for tens of thousands of years, the tribes of this valley built their entire world around buffalo. This wasn't just about their food or their shelter. Everything. Their ceremonies, their spiritual life. The Salish word for buffalo actually means the many blacks, because these animals once covered the entire landscape as far as the eyes could see. Every part of the animal was used during those times. Every life that was taken was understood as a sacrifice, not just a hunt. It was a gift. And the relationship worked both ways. You receive, you give back. Reciprocity. That philosophy of reciprocity ran through every single aspect of daily life. And then the soldiers came. By the 1870s, the buffalo were being deliberately slaughtered, a federal strategy to weaken the tribes by destroying their way of life. And it was working. The herds were vanishing, and what once seemed impossible, that the buffalo could simply disappear, was happening right in front of everyone. There was one man who saw it with absolute clarity. His name was Atatise. Peregrine Falcon Robe, a Pend d'Oreille man with a vision so far ahead of his time, it still moves me to think about it. He looked at what was happening and he felt in his bones that his people had a responsibility to act. On a hunt across the Continental Divide, he brought his idea to the tribal chiefs. He would bring orphaned bison calves back west over the mountains and start a herd. This way they could save them. The chiefs debated for 3 days and they couldn't reach an agreement. And so Atatise quietly withdrew his proposal and just went home without the calves. However, he never let go of the dream. Years later, the chiefs finally said yes, and Atatise's son, a young man named Latati, Little Falcon Robe, stepped up to carry his father's vision forward. What he did next is one of those things that when you really sit with it, really imagine it, it simply takes your breath away. He did this alone. Over the Continental Divide, where the terrain gets sharp and steep and brutally cold, with enemies on both sides and predators circling, this young man gathered orphaned bison calves, small, frightened, vulnerable, and literally walked them home over those mountains, every single step being a risk, every single mile an act of pure, stubborn love for something that his father had dreamed of saving. About 6 calves made it. 6. Think about that. 6 little buffalo calves. And hold that number in your mind as you look at everything around right now. Because everything that you're seeing, all the bison that I showed you on the range, traces back to those 6 animals and that one man's extraordinary journey. Those calves grew into a small herd under Latati's care, but then his stepfather, without permission and without a word, sold the herd to 2 tribal members named Michel Pablo and Charles Allard. Latati was heartbroken. And this is the part that gets me, because Walking Coyote was the one who made the sale. Outside history began crediting him as the man who brought the buffalo to the reservation. Atatise and Latati were completely written out of the story entirely. For generations, the true origin of this herd went untold. But the buffalo thrived. Pablo and Allard ranged the growing herd along the Flathead River, and the animals flourished in ways nobody had even dared to imagine. They became celebrated across the continent, used as breeding stock to help restore bison populations everywhere, including Yellowstone, where fewer than 24 animals had remained by 1902. By the end of the 1800s, the herd that had started with 6 orphaned calves carried over a mountain range by one young man had become the largest free-ranging bison herd in the entire world. Born from a vision, born from love, and born from one family's refusal to give up. And then, of course, the United States government came and dismantled it. In 1904, Congress passed the Flathead Allotment Act over fierce and heartbroken tribal opposition. The reservation was opened to non-Indian settlers. Fences went up. The Bureau of Indian Affairs told Michel Pablo, who had grown the herd to over 700 animals and loved those buffaloes really more than anything, that he had to sell. The man was absolutely crushed. After a roundup that lasted years, every last animal was gone. The United States refused to buy them, so Pablo sold his herd to the Canadian government. Meanwhile, and you really need to feel the full weight of this, wealthy Eastern conservationists had formed the American Bison Society, and they were looking for a place to establish a national bison range. A wildlife professor who knew and loved the Flathead Reservation pointed them here. In 1908, the federal government seized 18,800 acres of reservation land. The tribal leaders met with the U.S. Indian agent and told him plainly, "This is our hunting ground. We do not want to give it up." But the agent told them that they had no choice. And where was this initial herd for the new National Bison Range to come from? Well, 36 buffalo were purchased from the Conrad family ranch in Kalispell, the direct descendants of the very animals that Latati had carried over the mountains. The buffalo government had just forced Pablo to sell. They were taken, they were sold, they were taken back and fenced in, all on stolen land. The first job of the new range manager was to build a fence, and everyone understood that without being told what that fence really meant. An elder said many years later that the fence was as much to keep the Indians out as it was to keep the buffalo in. The Salish word for this place says it simply and completely. It just means fenced-in place. Tribal members were prohibited from working here, from managing the land, from participating in any care of the animals that existed only because of what their ancestors had sacrificed. But then, in 1933, something happened. a white buffalo was born here on the range. He was named Big Medicine. And to the tribes, a white buffalo is one of the most sacred, rare, and precious gifts that the natural world can give. For 26 years, he lived on these hillsides, on this taken land, and tribal members made special journeys just to stand near him. They could feel the power. One elder, a medicine man and tribal council member, always said that Big Medicine was here for a reason, that he was holding the spiritual connection between the people and the buffalo alive during the very decades that they were being kept out. And I certainly believe that. Through all those years, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes never stopped caring for what was theirs. They protected over 400,000 acres of the reservation for wildlife and cultural use. They restored the trumpeter swan, the peregrine falcon, the grizzly bear. They became one of the most respected conservation stewards in the entire country. All while this range, sitting in the heart of their homeland, remained behind someone else's fence. In 1994, a man named Mickey Pablo became the tribal chairman. He was a direct descendant of Michel Pablo himself. He felt this in his blood, that the connection to those buffalo, to this valley, to the vision his ancestor had to be tended before it was completely stolen. He believed the range should come home. It took nearly 30 more years. In 2022, 114 years after the taking, the CSKT Bison Range was finally returned to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And as I drove through here, watching these animals move across this valley, the Mission Mountains rising behind them, I just kept thinking about Atatise, standing on the other side of those mountains in the 1870s, just watching the herds disappear, feeling the weight of what was being lost. He had a vision, and his son carried it over a mountain range, literally on foot, alone, and through the cold. And it survived, through betrayal and theft and fences and 100 years of being told no. It survived. These animals are all here because of that family. This valley is healing because of these tribes. And this story, the real one, the true one, is finally being told. I hope that driving here with me today is just a beginning for you. And I ask you to look into it to learn more. The documentary called In the Spirit of Atatise tells the full story in the tribe's own words, so I'll link it below for you. Because I believe that some stories really deserve to be known, and certainly I believe that this is one of them. I hope that you enjoyed this video. It certainly was a wonderful drive for me. I love going into places like this that are somewhat isolated and not too populated. I drove around there for approximately 5.5, almost 6 hours, and there were only two other cars that I had come across a couple of times during it. So it's a little bit out of the way, but it's definitely worth it. And if you have a chance, if you're in the area, I highly suggest that you visit their visitor center and that you go there and see these magnificent bison. They truly are, as I said, magnificent. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, for listening to my rambling and watching my most unprofessional video shot with my telephone actually just hanging off of a phone holder on my windshield. But it's the best way that I can take you on some of these journeys with me. So please remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I'd love to read your comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.